Hi, I'm Anthony Casey, and welcome to episode 21 of Training Thought and Truth. Not too bad, how's things?
Good, super good.
Wow, that's a nice background you have behind you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's like a tapestry, because really it's like a storage closet looks back there, so I fixed it.
Very nice. Well, listen, thanks very much for reaching out and messaging me.
Yeah.
I'm really happy you did. I was looking at a bit of your work over the last few days. I haven't had time to read your book or anything like that, but I might give a brief introduction to yourself. This is my podcast, Training Thought and Truth. It's relatively new. It's only started in May, but it's about physical exercise. It's about physical health, mental health, and spiritual health, really. And I kind of like to get experts on, or people more experienced than me, and ask them a few questions about their stories, and maybe people might hear it and relate to it and take something from it then. So
yeah.
Maybe you can tell your story, and I'll give a brief introduction to yourself and what I found from Goalcast website. I had a brief introduction of yourself. So it was that I lost my notes today, so I'm reading off my phone, so you have to bear with me.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine.
Emily Davis, metaphysical expert and best-selling author of Damsel No More. Emily Davis has a passion for helping people awaken their intuitive magic within them. After surviving years of relationship abuse, she made her quest to help people slay their fears, live healthier lives, and discover their innate spiritual gifts through imagination, fun, and connection to their self. She deeply believes that everyone has their own set of metaphysical gifts and learn where they got them from and how to use them, which so happens to be her life's passion. She also co-hosts a metaphysical comedy podcast, Perfectionist Anonymous, and regularly does free intuitive readings on her Facebook page. So, So maybe you could talk about how you became your author for Damsel No More. I know that did very well, or how you became a best-selling author to begin with. I know it stemmed from a bad relationship. Maybe you can want to talk about that, or maybe you don't.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm kind of an open book on all of it, so feel free to ask me any and everything, and I will be as open as honest as humanly possible. So my story it's a little bit unique and a little bit not unique. You know what I mean? As far as there's so many people on this planet who have gone through an abusive or traumatic relationship to a degree, but specifically around my book. So my book actually is a little bit, it's not so much on the metaphysical side. It kind of took a totally different approach. So it was more of one of these passion projects that I knew I had to do because it was such an inspirational journey that I went on. So I was in an abusive relationship for about 4.5 years. Almost 5 years, right out of high school. So it was the first real relationship I had. So it laid the groundwork for how I believed that I was, should be loved or was worthy of loving. So it was really, really traumatic mentally for a very long time. So even after I had gotten out of that relationship, I really sincerely struggled to cope with the fact of all of the things that had come my way during that time. And I spent about 2-3 years really healing and trying my best to go to counselors and things along those lines. And I felt like I was making progress. I was like, oh, okay, I'm feeling better. I'm feeling healed. I'm feeling I'm leaving this in the past behind me. And then I ended up getting into a new, wonderful, healthy relationship. And I was hit over the head with all of the PTSD. Every little thing that had ever happened in the first relationship was coming up full force and just drowning me completely. And I knew that I needed to desperately make a change and figure out how to actually heal, because apparently all the stuff I had done when I wasn't in the relationship hadn't done all that much. And so I went on a whole new journey to really find out how I could heal myself. And I kept hitting roadblocks. Nothing was working. I hired coaches. I hired healers. I went to counselors again. I read 100 books. I tried everything and it wasn't working. And then the game changer for me was actually to make healing a game. So often we have this dialogue about how healing is going to be difficult, but worth it, or a challenge that you have to overcome or something along those lines. And that's a very common dialogue. but unfortunately isn't one that necessarily serves us. Yes, it can be a challenge, but challenges shouldn't be under the guise of being difficult and painful. Challenges can be fun. That's the point of video games and other games. So I was playing Dungeons and Dragons with my kids, and I was like, hey, I wonder if I could make healing a game like this. Like, what if I made myself a character and I leveled my character up and gave my character gear and helped her overcome a fear monster as opposed to me overcoming my fears, and make it something outside of myself? And that's what I ended up doing. And it was totally a different world. It worked so well, and I helped other people do it. And that's the process I wrote down in the book.
Wow. And did you come up with that idea yourself, just from watching the games and like it's hard to imagine, looking at something like that and then trying to transfer that whole mentality into your own life that way. But obviously it worked.
Yeah, I did come up with it myself. It's definitely an idea that no one else talks about or even understands, but there's such a deep healing power in, the things that we love that are our stories, like our fandoms, our fantasy, things that we follow along. Like, the power of that is so massive. And when I was playing D&D with my kids, my thought process was like, hey, like, I'm acting out a character, and what the character's going through is fun to go through, because I can actually play with it and I can have fun with it and I can go deep, and it actually reflects some part of myself. Mm-hmm. And knowing what I know from my metaphysical side and my metaphysical gifts, intuitively I was like, hold on, like, this could work. Like, this could be a real thing that could be productive. And that's basically how I came up with the idea. And anyone who does things like LARP or does tabletop gaming and stuff will say like, oh yeah, this has definitely helped me with X, Y, and Z. What I have done is just take it one step further, where you actually actively leverage a gaming system to help you heal. Okay,
that's very interesting. I know as part of, I suppose, our generation, we would have grown up when games were kind of on that revolutionary kind of, they became, I suppose, like, last generation games were kind of like dots beeping around a screen like tennis balls, or, this kind of thing.
Right.
The kind of role-playing games kind of came in a lot more. And I guess, like, I have seen over the years how, like, there is benefits to games. I know it gets a lot of bad press, it's like too much of gaming can do this, that, and the other, and that's true, but it's like too much of everything, right? Too much of coffee can be bad, too much of whatever. But I do remember, like, about even small things like hand-eye coordination is supposed to be very good for, or even just figuring out puzzle solving for, I think it helps a lot of kids with, difficulties or special needs, even in that frame of mind, kind of solve and exercise their brain. You see a lot of that going on as well.
Absolutely.
But I do know you talk about the world's first healing RPG, and that's what you talk about in your book. Is that right?
Yeah.
So what do you get? Like, how do you approach that for a reader? How do you get them into that mindset, or what do they actually do?
Absolutely. So the mindset of the book is really specifically geared to helping people overcome relationship trauma specifically, because that is the trauma that tends to really stick with us and glue to us throughout all the other relationships we have in our life, not just romantic ones, but like if you've ever been cheated on, like, you're going to have trust issues, right? Like, so all of those components. So we really try to work through that in the book. But if you do have just generalized anxiety too, like, you can use the same methods. It's just more geared towards the relationship stuff. But you start at the very beginning of the book. Each chapter is narrated by storyline, because all good games have cutscenes, and so does the book. It is essentially a game. So it starts and ends each chapter with really good storyline, so your character is invested in the storyline that is playing out for you. And you start by creating a character. You design yourself as a character, like what you're going to look like. You put a picture of yourself up on the wall, or you cut a picture out of a magazine, or you print it online, whatever it is, but you make yourself a character. And then you decide, hey, you make a list of your greatest fears, the things that you're really trying to overcome. And there's a whole process in the book that I describe for really nailing down what's real fear versus fake fear and all this different stuff. But you really nail down what you're fearing, and then that becomes your fear monster. And you're going to create this, and that's going to be your ultimate boss that you're defeating at the end of the book. Mm-hmm. And every chapter in between then is a new level where you're learning a new skill, and your character is going to gain a new piece of gear and go on a different adventure, a different quest, whatever it is, all for the guise of let's overcome this fear monster.
Very good. Because I do know, like, it's funny because when you talk about that, it's a lot of maybe our generation who will probably relate to this a lot more as well, because I know, like, with the games increasing technology as well, like, it's more realistic, more level looking. Like, I have one of these VR systems kind of at home. And I was listening to your interview. You had an interview with someone was asking you about the book, and yesterday, and they're talking about, you're talking about similar what you're saying now, and it made me like it's been gathering dust there, and I stuck it on. But you realize that you become so immersed in it that you make this avatar, but it is you because you're controlling the movements and the thought process and how to approach things. And games are a lot more free now. You hear this term open world, so you make your own and you do it your way. And the beauty of it does release anxiety. If you have a tough week or something like that, and you're this character, and you can kind of do what you please, because if you fall off the cliff, you're still sitting on your couch at home. There's no big consequence of it, I suppose.
Exactly.
But like going over hills and the likes of, I have this VR. Skyrim, the game. It's a very famous game. In VR, it's fairly intense as well. But you can see. Like I do see, like he was saying, the downside of the game, and not to hone in too much in the gaming, but my eyes do get sore. I think it was a bloodshot from playing a bit. But the idea that it is like that you kind of put it in book form, where the book is almost like a game, isn't it? And you kind of draw out from that. And I never heard that concept before. It's very interesting, and how to deal with. I guess it's the same, gives that anxiety release to the readers, and obviously it's done very well because a lot of people are obviously relating to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the coolest part about having the book be the game is you're really creating things in your imagination. I mean, it's the same reason why anytime we watch a movie that's based off a book, we're always like, oh, it's not as good as the book. Mm-hmm. It's because it's not what we personally imagined and what we personally invested our emotions into. Sure. So with this book, not only are you having this storyline going in the first place, but you're investing your emotions into your own storyline. That's actually you're gaining skills to act out in real life.
Yeah, that's very true. And can you see, like, as an author, like, do you foresee yourself writing another book? And if you do, can you see this kind of digital age that we're kind of talking about as well overtaking the paperback? And like, do you have an audio version of your book, or is that something you look at doing?
Yeah. So actually, right now it's only an ebook. But by about the end of March, beginning of April, it should release in audio form, which is super exciting. And then it will be in all bookstores, airport bookstores, libraries, the whole 9 yards, this October. So it's kind of like a staggered release process, which is really cool, and kind of really the new age of publishing is how it's going, is to do these kind of staggered and different approaches to the classic publishing world, because it really is the world of digital content. You're either reading books on your phone or you're listening to them. I have this weird problem because I love books like so much. My mom was a librarian. She worked for an author when I was a kid. Like, books are my life. And so I will listen to a book and then I'll go purchase the paperback and then I will read it again. And so, like, there is that component of it too, where people do still love books, but also not only is it digital age where like accessibility and stuff is important, but also you can carry your whole library in your pocket. And like, that is amazing, because I have 10,000 boxes of books and they're all just sitting in storage because I can't do anything with it. I don't have a grand library. And so it's making this act of reading a much more accessible and real thing for so many people who aren't necessarily capable of having tons of books.
Yeah, and I guess
checking them out from the library or whatever.
Everyone's kind of environmentally friendly now as well, aren't they? Like, the less paper you're using, the better, I suppose. But everyone seems to be a bit busier as well. I find, crazy busy, even with just people dropping by and things to go, and like, your friends, kids' birthdays, and all these things kind of come together where, it's very hard to sit down and dig into a book even, and I commute a lot. I think that's where podcasts and audiobooks and all that have come up a lot more. They've replaced the radio, because you want to hear a specific thing. You want to get stuck back into the story. And that's how I'm reading my books now. Apart from, because you can just manage your time and you don't have to waste that hour driving. You can actually be listening and enjoying a story. And it's funny, you talk about the conscious mind, the subconscious. Like, it's obviously things that work there, because it's almost like your conscious mind in the front is concentrating the book, and your subconscious is driving the car, which you'd imagine would be the other way around. Sometimes I think that's kind of funny, but also, your books are in your pocket, and so are your games now, and so are your music, your favorite, like, everything is there, and it's handy, and but that is the way it's going. But I thought was interesting, because obviously yours is being best selling on paperback. Can you talk about those? Well, I wanted to ask you about, you did say a couple of things about, I thought it was quite interesting when you said that it was when you were in your new relationship, but that's when everything caught up on you.
Yeah.
I presume a lot of people have come to you and been talking about their relationships or their history ever since you released this. Is that a common thread where things get buried and then you move on, and then when you're at a better place where your mind, maybe the subconscious pushes to the foreground? Is that what goes on there?
It's sort of like that. Yeah, so many people have come forward, and it's the truth of the matter is there's so many resources for right after you leave an abusive relationship, and then there's like no resources for 5 years later when you're trying to date again. It's just, and that goes with a lot of different things, like trauma after like a bad car accident or after the military experience. It all is relatively similar. Like right away there's stuff, but then years down the line, if it comes back, people are like, oh, you should be over it. And like that culture is changing, which is amazing, but it is a real thing. But really what happens when it's the nature of triggers in general. So a trigger is something that brings up your dense emotions. And the dense emotions are the ones that are harder to feel. They're not bad, they're not good. It's just you're harder to feel emotions, because all emotions are important. So I always like want to reframe it under that, because it's so essential to like not think of like, oh, I'm angry, this is a bad emotion. Like, heck no, if someone hits your car and your kid's in it, like you should be angry. That is a healthy thing. So emotions aren't bad. But a trigger is something that brings up those dense emotions. And when you have so many triggers that are trauma based, those triggers aren't activated until you're in a situation that would cause them to be activated. So for relationship abuse specifically, when I was single, all of the fear of not pleasing my partner and fear of like not keeping the house clean enough, and the anxiety around whether or not I could actually like be enough for them, or like all these different things, there was nothing triggering them because I was by myself. It was just me and my kids, and there wouldn't be anything triggering them because I wasn't in a relationship at the time. However, then I get into a relationship, even though it's a good one, my brain is like, oh, this is now where we're going to switch into this pattern of this past relationship we were in, because we have learned that this is something to be afraid of. And it's reteaching your brain like, no, that's not something we need to be afraid of anymore.
Yeah. No, it is interesting. I also think, can you talk about, obviously the relationship, you must in the beginning have not seen the signs in them ways, and I guess it's hard to, because I do know, I've read a lot of things where it says, you're made feel like you're not worth, this is all you're worth, this kind of, what do you call it, like it's this kind of treatment is all that you're worth anyway. Was there a moment in time where, a specific moment where you said, that's enough, I'm out, and or how do people recognize? It's hard to say how do people recognize them telltale signs, I guess, but it's probably individual for everybody. But was there a moment where you realized that now I'm going and moving on?
Yeah, kind of. So it's interesting to look back on like, how did I get into this relationship in the first place? And like that narrative really is it's narrated by the fact that I knew about my metaphysical and spiritual gifts from the time I was a very young child, but I also was made aware very early on that they were weird. And I was weird to, be able to see people that weren't there and be able to feel other people's emotions and pain and things like that in my physical body, and know things were going to happen before they happened. Like I'd freak people out. And so I suppressed a lot of it and tried to hold all of that in. And what that caused, like the rippling pattern, is that I constantly sought out external validation, that I was worth it, that I was accepted, that I was loved, that I was cared about. And so when I found this person who was totally willing to externally validate me, he was very, very good at communicating exactly what I needed to hear at that particular time. I immediately was like, yes, I'll be in a relationship with you. This is exactly what I've always wanted, because subconsciously I was just trying to prove to myself that I was valuable and worth caring about, and I wasn't just a weird outcast. And so that's part of the reason that got me in there. And then that psychological process carried throughout the whole relationship of, oh, he has this pain, it's okay, he loves me enough even though I'm weird, I'm going to fix his pain and he'll love me even more. And so even in the times when it started to get really bad, because there was signs obviously from the very beginning, which you don't notice at the beginning, but after about a year and a half, almost 2 years, it was like, oh, okay, there's more things happening that don't necessarily feel like they are part of a normal relationship, but I love him so much, it's justifiable that he's experiencing this. And if I can just change myself enough to make him feel better, then everything will be okay. And then it gets to a point where you're in fight or flight mode almost all the time because nothing is ever okay. And you know nothing you do will ever be okay. Like there's nothing you can do to actually make this person happy. But you're just so caught up in it, believing like, oh, I just did something wrong again, or I'm supposed to do this better, or I can figure it out. I can figure it out again, or like, you're protecting your kids, so you're taking whatever it is, like that mentality. So you really get caught up into that, and all of it justifies the program that you have in the way back of your mind that was trying in the very beginning to tell you you weren't lovable because you were weird. This is all supporting that, which is like your brain is basically masking all of this horrible stuff because you're supporting this belief that you hold that you're not good enough in the first place. So it's really hard to identify specifically like a moment where you can be like, this is enough, because even when things started getting really physical, it wasn't in my brain, I deserved it. Like, oh, I did this, I deserved it. And so it's hard. It was hard to see. And even looking back on it, you're so brainwashed, and it's a reality. You're very brainwashed and you're very stuck in it. The moment for me when I realized I actually had a realization that I was being abused. He had already been physical. It had been years of like horrible verbal abuse, horrible mental and emotional abuse. But I was, it's kind of a funny story. I was selling cars at the time, and a woman came on the car lot. I'm very bad at selling cars, so like we're just gonna lay that out there, like not good at it. And a woman came on the car lot. And she was like I think she was almost homeless, but definitely very eccentric. I think was addicted to something like out there. And she was looking at like the cheapest car on the lot. And I walked up to her, I was like, hey, and she's like, hey, like I need to get out of here. I need to buy this car. And I was like, okay, like let's go inside. We can talk about it. Kind of like doubting, but that's like going to be a thing. And she ended up kind of breaking down and explaining her situation to me a little bit of how hard, she was in a really bad spot and all this different stuff. And I was like, okay, well, like, I would love to get you this car, but like, you do have to pay for the car. And she's like, I have someone who will put the down payment down for me. And I was like, oh, okay. She's like, I'm going to call him. So she calls him and leaves a message. And then she's like, hey, I need to go run down to the store. And she leaves. And she didn't come back that day. And I was like, oh, she didn't really have somebody. Like she just needed to talk, and like left. But then the guy called back. And he was like, yes, I absolutely will pay for the car for her. I just want her to be okay. Like, just tell me what I need to do. As soon as she gets back, please have her call me. I'm so happy she made contact. I will do anything to get her out of this situation. Like that was his whole thing. And I was just like, whoa, like that's really interesting. At this point, I was living 8 hours away from anyone I knew. I was super isolated. All I was doing was, catering to my husband at the time's needs and trying to protect my kids and just living day to day in like this horrible situation. And I just remember that was kind of like wow, okay, here's this person that's really willing to help her. Huh. And so she ended up coming back like a week later, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Like, you're here. Like, he called back. Like, he wants to help you. Like, here we go. Like, I can get you going. And she was just like, no, like, I don't think I can accept his help after all. And she just kind of like left. And I was like so sad. I was like, why won't you accept his help? Like, you're in such a bad situation. And here's this person who wants to help you, and you're not choosing to accept it. And it was that moment that my brain was like, that's exactly what you're doing. And I was just like, oh, yeah, I am doing that. Like, I have people that would help me get out of this. And I'm not even acknowledging how bad it is. I just want to keep pretending that it's okay, even though everyone who loves me knows that it's not, and would love more than anything for me to be safe and my kids to be safe. And that was like the switch moment where I was like, I have to figure out how to get out of this.
Yeah. Okay. It's very interesting that, how you come across things like that, isn't it? Like that, really with her episode in your life, nothing really came from her, like in her life. Like she went there, did decide not to, but it made such an impact on you and it changed your way. Like I do often think that there's more forces going on than we think, where that put things in our way to make us realize things. And there's certain timing that you just can't be coincidental, I think, in our own lives. And that's why one thing I want to talk to you, because you brought up a few times, is the metaphysical gifts. Can you talk? Because this is something I'm quite interested in. This is episode 21, and I've spoken a lot about having the past with this as well, and a metaphysical, very metaphysical kind of past as well. But can you explain your metaphysical gifts and how you discovered them, or when you first came across them?
Yeah, absolutely. So me now, the gift that I use now is I'm a channel, so I can talk to your spirit guides or your past loved ones, or even like, like ascended masters, or channel things from your past lives. Like, I'm very good at channeling, and I can see it very visually and see the energy in your field and energy at play, energies heading your way in the future. That sort of thing is like my wheelhouse of what I mostly do. I'm also an incredibly clairsentient person, which means I feel physically things that are happening in your energy. So unlike an empath who emotionally feels your emotions, like if you were angry, they would feel angry. It's not like that. If someone's angry, I feel my chest tighten. So it's like I feel it physically in my physical being, as opposed to clair empathy, where you'd feel it in your emotional being. And so I have certain physical signs that help me like give medical readings for people. Like I can be like, oh, I feel like my kidneys are in pain. Like, do you have kidney issues? Like, what's going on with that? Like, I can sense the energy there. So I do some energy healing work as well. So like those are like the big umbrella of my gifts. And also like vibration sensing. Like I can sense the vibrations of things really keenly. So like that's like my developed me after spending years really developing and working on this. Originally, I knew I had these weird things happening to me since the time, for as long as I can remember. There was a time when I was really little where I was freaked out by them, because like I would see people in my bedroom as I was going to sleep, or see animals talk in my bedroom, or whatever it was. Like there's like, as a kid sees things, and I would feel overwhelmed by like so many people in the room, and I would shut down because I would feel all of their feelings like in my body, and I had no ability to hold boundaries or anything like that, and I didn't know what was going on. And I remember I like brought it up to my mom, and she was just kind of like, okay, like, go play. That sounds nice. And I was just like, oh shit, okay, like this is not normal. And I'm sure I explained it terribly because I was like 7, but like, okay, this is not what everybody experiences. And then like throughout my adolescence, I did try to develop them to a degree, but in the private of my own home, like I was trying to not openly share it. I did, like I said, it caused me to seek external validation. I spent I did a ton of different types of drugs and stuff in high school, because it was just consciousness expanding, and it made me feel like a normal person. Because like everything I would experience doing drugs, I was like, oh, this is just like my normal brain. Like I feel justified because everyone else in this room feels this way too now. So that was like a huge thing for me during that period of time. But then when I was in the abusive relationship, everything shut off. There was no magic. There was no metaphysical anything. Even unless my personal guides were physically causing things to happen in physical reality, which I have one guide in particular that will do that. That was the only thing. And even then it was just like, oh my God, I feel like my house is haunted. Like this is scary. It wasn't actually me connecting to anything, because I was just so feared of everything. Everything was afraid. And so then after I left the abusive relationship, I was like, oh yay, my magic's going to come back. Like I'm finally ready to like really step into this. I have this feeling in my gut that this is part of my purpose in life. Like I know I have these gifts because there's some purpose here. Mm-hmm. And then they didn't come back. They didn't come back at all. And it was just still blocked. And I was so angry. And I remember I was thinking just like, he's going to take this from me too. Like even my magic, like this thing that was so me that he didn't even know about. Like he took this from me. How dare he do that? And that was kind of one of those moments where I was like, no, fuck that. Like he is not taking anything else from me, and I'm going to reclaim these. And so part of my trauma healing process wasn't just to stop having this massive anxiety and everything, but it was also like, I want to know my magic again. And I know if I can unblock enough of this, it will come back. And eventually it did. And I really was able to dial down that process of how I could unblock all that trauma and really tap into my gifts. And that's what I help people do now, because I deeply believe every person on this planet has their own set of metaphysical gifts. They're just clogged up by all of the trauma and stuff that we experience in life. And if we can get that released and overcome these fears that we have around them, we can all use them as an agent of good in this world.
That's very interesting. I'll give you a brief kind of story of what I was talking about, which is kind of similar along the lines, but probably not as much. When I was a kid, as far as I can remember as well, I would see kind of shadows around the room every night, and it would go on for years and years. And I'd tell my parents, and they were kind of brushing it off. And when the age of the internet came, I realized there was millions and millions of like people seeing the exact same thing. They were describing it like to the T. And it kind of throughout my teenage years, that was from like 3 or 4 years old, all the way up teenage years. I think it died off a little bit in my teenage years, and I went to see this. I have one part of me is a bit afraid of the medium side of things, because I went to a psychic. My mother was really into that stuff, and one of the last things she said to me was, after telling me about my family and all that, and very accurately, it blew me away. Someone said to me, "Go in there, cross your arms, don't move an inch, because they can read your body language." And that's what I did. And I was, whoa, where is he getting this from? But he did say to me before I left, he said, "Them shadows that you were seeing as well, they're real." 2 nights later, for the first time in years, it all came back, and it was a horrible sense of dread whenever I used to see them. And the same thing. And he had given me a book, and he said, "You can do what I do if you read this. This is a good guideline." And I didn't, and I stepped back from it all, and tried to, because going to see him, I felt as though it opened the door for it, like I was making it real again, almost by speaking it. It manifested itself almost,
Mm-hmm.
Up until a few years ago, it was still happening. Maybe 4 or 5 years ago, where it got very heavy. And my nana was super religious. She's passed now, and she said, if you talk to this person, she might maybe, and she's trying to figure it out and help me out with it. And then one day, I tried. I was very new agey kind of, and I was trying to find lots of different things. And one thing I did find, funny enough, was I had seen a documentary where someone got rid of it by saying, "Jesus, I trust in you." And I said it, and it went away. And I came back a few more times, and I said it, and it went away. And that led me down. I was always a very spiritual person. That led me down a very Christian kind of path. Now, I know it doesn't. I'm not sure, that probably doesn't mesh with how you see the spiritual world as well. But it has helped me tremendously, and got my mental health, or that's why I link the spiritual. That's why I added that. It was always physical, mental health. Then it was like spiritual, because it got everything. Got my mental health back on track, which got my physical health back on track, and I just thought it was great in that way. But and I do know, I've heard often people talking about, like you said, you can sense people's auras. Some people can, walk into a room and see the energy around someone. And I know someone actually went into my auntie's house years ago, which they thought was haunted, and they saw my nana sitting there, and they said she's a very strong energy around her, and maybe she was just such a spiritual person in that way as well.
Yeah.
But I don't. How do you sit with the idea of Jesus, or of Christianity? Then, is that something that you don't really think much about?
No. So I was raised Catholic, like extremely Catholic, my whole life. Like, did all the catechisms. My mother is very, very devout Catholic, and so I view anything that helps you connect with stuff that's beyond your physical eyes as a benefit. Like, bottom line, if it helps you connect spiritually with something that's outside of you, and that is this grander thing that helps you awaken that magic that's within you, like, that is a good thing, like, inherently, and a wonderful, beautiful thing. So to me, though I don't necessarily follow any sort of religious doctrine of like rules set down by people, that doesn't, like, I do not discredit the beauty of connecting in that way at all. Some of the things don't necessarily, like, some of the belief systems and stuff, specifically in Catholicism, don't match up with things that I have seen, physically seen myself, or felt myself that way. And so that's part of the reason where I'm like, okay, like, there's room on this planet for all of the different beliefs, where essentially, as long as you're preaching love and connecting through love, and love is what's real, like, that's what matters.
So it's interesting, because something that happened when I said these things, I felt a different type of presence in the room, like a positive one.
Mm-hmm.
But I was raised Catholic as well, but I found myself not agreeing, couldn't get it in the viewpoint of the cat, because, like you said, a lot of stuff I was seeing was different or not correct, and it made me delve into more, so I had to figure this out. Why is one thing working, but I don't agree with this? And it really helped me differentiate between Christianity and Catholicism, where Catholicism wasn't like an organized religion, where Christianity was just reading the words of Christ rather, because I felt as though that was that force almost, or that light that was taking over the others. And really, I found myself not being religious, not going to church and things like that, but being very, very spiritual with the guidance of the words of Christ. That's when I realized I was pulling from organized religion, basically, and realized that, hang on, like, even in the Catholic Church, it's like, hang on, he didn't actually say that. He said, you didn't say you have to go to church. He said you can sit in your room and speak by yourself, and it's
Yeah.
way different, like, and well, I just thought it was interesting because it does just preach the love and helping each other out, and that's all he was all about, I'm interested to hear your guides, you talk about that. Who are they, or what? Have you ever asked? Or sorry, what do you know about them, really?
I know a lot about my guides and everybody else's guides for that matter. Everybody's guides I can tap into, and they give me all sorts of information, which is really, really cool. Specifically, I have a couple really main guides, and they actually kind of fall into some categories, which is really neat. And I actually recently did a spirit guide episode of my podcast. I run a metaphysical comedy podcast, or I co-host it, and so we did a fun little blip on spirit guides too. So if you want deeper information, there's a lot to talk about. But some guides can show up as entities that are just like a light being that you see as a light being that are just there to interact with you one or two times to help you keep you on the same path. Or they can follow you for your whole life. They can show up as angels. They can show up as past loved ones. They can even show up in your physical life as spirit guides as well, where the universe has sent like a person to guide you forward, like that woman who was at the car dealership. She was a spirit guide essentially because I needed her in that moment, and so the universe is like, here you go. So my guides specifically, I have one, and I mentioned a little bit ago, like she was very physical. She physically does things in my space, which made me think my house was haunted when I was in the abusive relationship and couldn't tune in and stuff. But she is with me all the time physically. All the time. Every house I've ever been into for my entire life, she's there. I call her Hope because Hope is always there. And she likes that name, so she was like all about it. And her and I like actively communicate, and she like does physical things where like I know she wants to communicate with me or is sending me messages. Like I have a lamp in my room that if you touch it, it turns on, and she'll turn it on. Like I'll come into the room and it'll be on. I'll be like, oh, okay. So Hope needs to talk. And then we'll sit down and I can tune into her and have a conversation. But really what she is for me is she's kind of like an energy protector. And she protects like my physical space from, like any entities that are not good or whatever, and she's done that my whole life. She's not as prevalent now because I can do that for myself. Like I've learned enough tools to be able to be safe all the time. So she's less prevalent as she was, but she's still always here. So I feel her constantly. I feel it right now. And then I also have like some higher level almost, so like in my experience, like deities have different kind of levels, right? So like, and not necessarily even deities is the right term, but like beings have different types of levels. There's people who are just us that have passed away, that are just kind of sitting in the lower level. They're still going through human school, like they will reincarnate, or they will learn things from just beyond this space. And then there's like deeper levels where they're like higher level beings, and that's what, in the Christian terms it would be like angels, or like that type of thing. Mm-hmm. And there's other beings in that level too, and those are like the ascended masters, etc. So I have a couple of those type of beings that are also really, I tune into them very often, and they are always in my court, and I can ask them for guidance, etc. And then also my dog is one. My dog is a spirit guide for me for sure. And I was actually sent a message that he was one. Like I like downloaded it from the universe, like my dog is a spirit guide, and he totally is. Like he's one of those very, very in tuned beings, where I'm like, you are totally a developed creature on your own. He took zero training and is super well trained, like one of those like very much is always by my side, will push me out of the way of danger, like the whole 9 yards. So like that's some of my guides that are like really prevalent in that way. And then I also will occasionally have like someone stepping forward because I need a message. They're going to guide me just this once. They're not personally invested in my stuff, like whatever. You can go about your day, Emily, but I do need to tell you this. And I'll be like, oh, okay, thank you, I appreciate that. And then that'll be kind of what it is.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned dogs, because I think dogs are very interesting animals, aren't they? They're very in tap with human emotions on a kind of love and spiritual level as well. And it's very interesting. If I personally would believe more in less of evolution and more kind of intelligent kind of metaphysical designer in that way, because there is such connections that are more than physical, and dogs definitely do hold a very close bond with humans, I think, especially certain dogs, like you said, like, we could have had 9 dogs over the course of our life. One in particular, it would just make such an impact, on our whole life, all of us, and I think it's amazing. One thing I wanted to ask you, just as interest, like you were talking about, you can see, or you can tap into other people's kind of guides as well. Just interested, can you tap into anything from us talking?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So your Nana that you mentioned has passed away. She's been sitting behind your shoulder this entire conversation. So it was cute when you were like, yeah, like there's like a lighter presence like came into the room and I could feel that presence. It was totally 100% her, and she's like sitting like right there in your space, and she's like very actively near you. So like that was like really intriguing. Like I knew that like right from the beginning, and she came in like halfway through, but energy field wise, like she's there for you for sure. And then other guys, like anything else I can see in your guide, if you're good with me tapping into your energy field, like I don't want to.
That's okay. Yeah.
Okay.
I feel in a quite strong spiritual place now where I'm not worried about that kind of stuff anymore. Yeah.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure. I always ask before I do any of it, because like your energy space is still your space.
Yeah.
It's just like you don't want someone to come up and like boop your nose on the train. Like I don't want to boop your energetic nose. So yeah, so in your space, so she's definitely there and like very strong presence. Like and generationally too. It's like a lot of like warm energy and warm light in your space. And then you also have like I don't think you knew him in life. It could be almost like feels like almost past lifey, but he is also super in your court, and he's less present as in like your day to day, as like I'm sure you've felt the presence of your Nana, or like felt like she sent you signs or something, so you kind of like feel that warmth, or almost you might even have gotten her smell or something like that. That's like a very visceral sign from her, like kind of in your day to day. He is not as much that, but he is definitely helps you when you're calling things in. He's like one of the guides that is really good with like things that you want to happen, bringing those into your reality. So he's kind of a manifester. And like I said, I don't think you knew him, like he wasn't from this physical lifetime, so definitely just kind of in your court from beyond this particular realm that we're in. And he is really clearly, he's like very active and very proud of you, but not so much sending you the physical signs, so it's harder to tap into that. But the cool thing is like he has a very protective energy too, so if you ever needed any sort of like, hey, I'm feeling uncomfortable or something, if you were to do that, he would be the one that would show up for you. Which is really interesting. Yeah. And then you also have like it's like a little bird. It's like the best description. It's like a tiny little bird, but it's mainly light, and it's super big and very connected to like your intuition and your guidance. So it's like one of those things when you get that intuitive pull, it's like your little bird has like been like, hey, look over here, like look at this thing over here that you're missing. And so that's kind of those are the like immediate ones in your space right now anyway.
Wow, that's very interesting. Because I remember the fortune teller said to me years ago, you had this, well, you say spirit guide or guardian angel, I'm not sure what he said. And he said, that it was this guy, Sebastian, and if you look up, he has a certain feast day and things like that, he said. And funny enough, when I looked it up, his feast day was the 20th of January, which happens to be my birthday. And, I met that guy for the first time ever. And I was like, from hundreds of years ago when he was actually murdered, I think. But I know,
yeah.
It was very, like, sometimes you hear these things, it's very, interesting, like, in what you take from them almost,
Mm-hmm.
And when you're talking about in metaphysical, so do you believe in higher being, like a designer or creator of the metaphysical world and the natural world?
I do. I have a very open relationship with creator of all that is what I call the being. Yeah. I actually became a Theta Healer a while ago because it was something I was really trying to tap into. Is like I knew my gifts were really active right before bed, like right as I was trying to fall asleep, and that's when you're entering the Theta brainwave. So of course the universe was like, oh, here, you should try this thing, and I totally did. And the whole thing is about fostering like a you can actually communicate with creator, and creator communicates back. It's like the craziest. You hear everything, and it's amazing. It's like the coolest modality ever. So since that time, it's been a really deep bonding experience with like growing my relationship with creator, because I had some trauma around that from being in the Catholic Church and from not aligning and from being told multiple times like how wrong I was to not align with the church, and I think as an organization, like no major statements on the Catholic Church, but like if it's something's not serving you, nothing should ever tell you you're wrong for having that thing not serve you.
Yeah.
That's like my biggest thing. And so I had some like residual like ick, like I don't necessarily want to, like I know there's a creator energy out there, I feel it, I see it, I can see it in everything that exists, like I know there's that, but I don't necessarily want a relationship with that because like I'm scared of like the pain from my past relationships with that. So I had to overcome a lot of that. But since then, it's really, really a cool bonding, and the energy of creator is freaking powerful and amazing and just pure love. So,
I do think, and maybe, I think this is true for me, and I think maybe it's true for you, but maybe you have a different view on it. But that, so the likes of me saying that, I saw these things and it's very depressing or oppressive on my childhood or growing up, and seeing that nearly every night. I also got quite physical when I was a teenager in my early 20s, as if like a choking sensation or seeing, but and then I overcame it, and I try now to do the podcast to help people and to try get them to relate to different guests where they might be, and I think that I had to go through that. Sometimes people have to go through hard different things in life. Everyone goes through their bouts, their depressive, they hit their rock bottoms, and it's just the hope is that they find something, they come back up, and they can tell someone else how they came back up, so maybe they can help them. Do you think as though, maybe, I'm not saying you need to go through any of what you went through, but that the fact that you did, maybe you were chosen to be able to, reach a lot more people by after going through that? Like, someone has to go through, the worst case scenario to help other people relate to them and also bring them out of that darkness.
Yeah, I definitely think I had to go through it. Like, it's taken time, but I have deep gratitude for the experience. I'm not saying I have gratitude for him. Like, I nothing him. I don't have any emotional feelings towards him at all. I don't feel angry. I don't feel like I necessarily have to forgive him. I don't care. It's whatever. But for the experience, like, I'm deeply grateful, because I had the realization a while back that I am the person now, though I achieved nothing that I ever planned on achieving at all. Like, I other than having a book, that's like the only achievement that I was like, this is something I want in my life. Like, I've always wanted to be an author, but I had all these big dreams and all these big plans of where I was going to go and the person I was going to be. And though I achieved none of those things, I am the person that I've always wanted to be.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have ever become that person without having gone through what I had to go through. And it's the most beautiful and peaceful feeling to know that you fully are that person that you've always dreamed of being. Like, I spend all day, every day talking about weird magical stuff, and no one's like, kill the witch. Like, it's great. Like, it's huge and just so different. And like, we're in this space in this culture where we can have this dialogue together, and then also we're in the space in this culture where I can feel that safety, and it's really, really beautiful and magical. And so, would I have ever changed anything? Probably not.
Yeah,
I probably wouldn't.
It's horrendous to go through at the time, but like the person you are now obviously is the poster person for for other people who's going through it, men or women, who have to go to that and come out of it, And it's, and do you think you'll write another book, or will it be more geared towards people, honing people in on their metaphysical gifts? Or maybe you do that already. I know that you also have an empowering site, don't you? Emily Davis Empowerment. Maybe my time.
Yeah. So currently what I am is I call myself a spiritual empowerment coach. But basically what I do is I help people discover their purpose through unlocking their metaphysical gifts. That's basically what I do. So, I mean, there's this pull in people where you know that you have this greater purpose, this higher purpose, and you know that there's these gifts inside of you, but you have fear, you have shame, and you don't know how the heck to get any of it done. Like, those are the people that I help. If you have that pull and you know that there's this calling, that's what your gifts are for. They're for you to help achieve your purpose in this lifetime. So those are the people I help. That's my current business. And so people can join my program in that way. And then I also do like intuitive readings and stuff. And on my website, actually, so my website is damselnomore.com, which is the name of my book. I actually have my book available for free in ebook form. So if anyone wants to go download my free ebook, I wrote it to help people. Like I said, it was like a passion project. So there it is for you guys, because I would love to give it out to your listeners.
Link that there.
Yeah, absolutely. And then also on there, you can ask one free intuitive question from me, whether it's about your future, your guides, your past lives, whatever it is. So all of that is on my website as well. But I also do intuitive readings, like paid ones where I go really in depth for like an hour and we get clear. So yeah, that's kind of what I do. in my actual business, my day to day, which again, super magical. I get to talk about magic all day. It's ridiculously fun. I am going to write another book. I've written multiple fantasy novels that are very high vibration, very much about emotional intelligence, but they are fantasy. And so those are on, they're submitted to agents right now because it's a little bit of a different publishing process from nonfiction to fiction. So those we'll see if they go within the next little bit of time. And I'm working on a historical fiction too, so we'll see how that goes. But and I know I do too many writing. But then I'm also going to write probably another. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but I feel it in my own energy field coming up within this next. I don't think it's going to be in 2020. It gets published, but probably 2021. And I'm literally just speaking energy intuitively, like from what I can see of my own future. But I will probably write another nonfiction that is going to be more along the lines of I want to continue the character healing series that I've started with Damsel No More, but taking it to a different place, right? So like this is the healing from abuse one. Let's do another one that's about healing from this or, whatever it is and go to that space. So I'll expand more on that as well.
You're one of those, that annoying percentage of people who get to do what they love and from it, because everyone else has to get up at 5 a.m. and drag themselves to work kind of thing, That's the goal really, isn't it? Like, famous being a major rock star where you have to travel everywhere. The goal is really doing what you love and making your living from that.
Yeah.
And, something you're passionate about. And I think you're. It seems to me you're very lucky. I'm quite jealous of you're able to do that.
Oh, thank you. It's been a hard fight to get here, though. Yeah, I spent a lot of years doing HR management, and that was not as fun.
Yeah. No, I think it's great. It's amazing. And I think everyone should aspire to that. They should sit down, and see what they, I'm a fan of kind of Jordan Peterson for a while. He says that what you find meaningful. What you chase that's meaningful should be an obligation, and you think that you come to a certain point in your life where different things become more meaningful as you get older, and I wanted to ask you a question that I know I'm going back this a bit, but it's just interesting for me because when I talk about the bad spiritual experiences and the good and the figure of Christ specifically, regardless of religion, Catholic Church. Kept, announcing itself or pulling into my view. Have you ever asked this is just purely my own curiosity, but have you ever asked your spiritual guides about that figure of that person or that spirit? Because obviously, the question in Christianity is, did he resurrect? But definitely his spirit lives on, like it's 2020 for that reason, that he's such an impact. Have you ever asked them specifically about that particular person?
Not specifically, however, what I can tell you from like energetically what I can sense is the layers of like ascended beings, right, that I talked about. That's where the spirit is. And different ones have come to this planet at different times to basically teach us again that we should love each other. Again and again and again in different variety, and they call in different people. I call it having your own spiritual mountaintop, right? So you have your own little hill and you're on top of your hill, and some people like your hill and some people like the hill that's over there.
Yeah.
But you're all talking about the same things using different words. He's in that realm of he has a really, really tall hill and he came at that time, and like that his soul is like from that ascended zone to again try to teach us to love each other, and so that's his hill and people are attracted to that. But that's as far as I know of that, his particular soul. Like that's what I sense, and I could probably tune in more. It would take a little bit more time because he's kind of layers away from me, but yeah, that's that it's under that overarching of like these higher, more evolved intelligently beings, and spiritually that are connecting with us in this human place.
Yeah, that'd be very interesting. If you ever did that, I'd definitely go look at that. It'd be great.
Yeah.
Are you still a gamer?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. What are you playing at the moment?
I am sporadically playing about 17 different things. So on my handheld I have I'm playing Pokemon Sun and Moon because like that's a forever journey of Pokemon. And then right now I am also playing Monster Hunter. Okay. The Iceborne version, yeah, which is super fun and totally dig it. And me and my fiance are like 75% through Borderlands 3, and I'm having the thing that comes up where I'm like, I don't want to finish it yet. Like, So we're kind of doing in that zone too.
Yeah.
So those are like my big ones that I'm playing at the moment.
Something that's quite interesting. There's a game I have called Resident Evil VR, and I cannot play the game. It's just too much. It's too intense.
I was gonna say for VR, ow, like that's gonna be
it's the
brutal.
scariest thing of it's just crazy. And I had my brother over Christmas time, and he was having a few drinks. He said, "I'll give it a bash," and he had a bottle of whiskey beside him, and he kept sipping from it. He was going for it, and he's not been able to sleep for like days after it. Like he's having nightmares and all.
That's horrible.
Yeah, I often hear this very true thing though. The more you watch horror films and get into that, the weaker it does make your defense to that kind of thing. A few people have said that to me. Do you agree with that in that way?
Oh yeah, I don't do horror anything.
Yeah.
Absolutely zero. And I have very strong boundaries. Like I have basically the way my channeling works is I go into a space that I've created in my brain, and it's kind of like the concept of like the perfect cube, right? Where I go in there and only the things in that space, the only things that I let in are the things that I need to let in at the time. So if I am removing a negative entity from someone's house, that thing can come into that space. That's fine. It can't harm me. This is my space. I control it. But you're coming in, like I'm taking you in, we're talking, and then I'm going to put you up to the light, essentially, is the concept. So yeah, like you lower those defenses, especially if like you don't have the training or the framework or the boundaries or anything of those sort of things. Like there are definitely entities and things that want to suck off of your energy, and some of them aren't even necessarily bad, but they're still energy suckers, and they're going to drain you, and they're going to give you anxiety, and they're going to you're going to feel them on your physical body. One of the things I do for people is I will go in and I can pull if you have one of those in your energy field, which 99% of people do because they don't clear their energy, and so they just have like these suckers that are basically stuck on them. I can go in and pull those off, and you'll feel the physical pain of like something got pulled off of your body, because there is these entities that do that. And so if you're doing if you're super into like watching horror movies, or even if you aren't super into it and you do it for the first time in a long time or something like that, like it's going to immediately just bring into your consciousness the possibility of these things being there and being in your space. And that is going to kind of like make those things be like, oh, I can possibly be in your space. That's kind of fun.
Yeah.
And they might not come in the way that like the horror movie does. Like most of the time, like a negative entity in your space, the worst they're going to do is like knock a plate off the counter, or something like that, make you feel scared. There's a very small percentage of people that are like have serious physical problems or like things like that happen where they're like very, very, very haunted and physically connected to this thing. But they can always be removed. That's another thing. It's like that it's not a life sentence. If this is something in your house or whatever, like we can get rid of that, no problem. But that it does kind of like lower that shield, because you're just making it part of your conscious awareness, and it's part of like in your vibration now that this is the thing that can happen.
Yeah, and I think the lower, like I think when I said I was a small, like a kid, and these things happened to me over time, it got to a stage where I did wake up choking, and it came from a dream where my granddad, who had passed, I wasn't that close to him or anything like that, but there was something strange going on, very vivid dream, and my family were surrounded by him, and he was like apologizing to someone in the family. And as I got closer, something wasn't going right, and Lake stepped to grab me. But I woke up, and there was just like this thing, and I was pulling the fingers off it almost, and I was choked. And my brother came out and flicked the light on without coming in, and the thing like jumped on, and it got to the stage where it was almost like that. That's why when I ended up going to my nana, because I was like, I can't figure out what's going on. And luckily now, like it did come back then initially when I was saying my own mantra, and then but my fear level dropped severely, and I felt as though there was something coming in and overtaking it, and then it just completely went away. But I do have a friend who was quite atheist, or a couple of years ago, and these things are happening to him. And he's, he feels as though the more you drink, sometimes, it's like the following days after that, and which makes sense, and now he does believe in a God, because he just thinks that there's the bad, then there must be the good side of things as well. And if it's not just a physical world, there must be metaphysical behind it. And if it's metaphysical, there must be a designer or better intelligence or something, that is that way. But it's interesting, it's things like you said. You don't get to talk to many people about it, but we're able to have these conversations. I think there's a better awareness with the age of the internet. People are after realizing these things are happening across the globe, and we need to tune into them. We have subconscious minds that can't be explained by science, and we need to figure out why they're there and what's our purpose is the big thing, really, isn't it? And that's what separates us from the animals, really.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's our, like, we're all ascending. Like, the next stage is, like, we're evolving our consciousness. Like, we're out of this stage where we all are just hoping that we make it through the day, that we were in for thousands of years as a species. And now we're like, hey, we have made the tools for us to be able to dive into this beautiful part of ourselves that we haven't been able to do before. And it's just this really unique time to be alive, because no time like this has existed before on this planet in any type of capacity. Like, we get to just expand our consciousness and do our best to understand those things that we as a species suppressed for a long time, or didn't want to look at because we were trying to do everything else. And now we get to look at those things and be like, hey, like, maybe this stuff isn't actually scary. Like, your thing horrifying, terrifying, but like also you're now in this path because of it.
Yeah.
Right. So like, you now have overcome this and you have this new faith in things that you needed to serve you, so we can actually like look at things in like a whole picture perspective, and more in a thrive instead of survive, and really delve into that, which is so unique and cool.
I want to ask you, what's your message for people who might be stuck in that place at the moment? Afraid to, like, fear is the big thing, isn't it? Of getting people out. What would be your message or your own words to them if they found this talk?
Yeah, the first thing I always say when people are like, "Oh, I'm afraid of this thing," ask yourself why and what if. Mm-hmm. So, like, why are you afraid of it? Are you afraid of it because you do not know what it is? Totally reasonable. I understand that. But what if it's a good thing? Like, what if maybe this thing is here to help you? What if these gifts that you feel where you're feeling overwhelmed all the time by everyone's emotions can actually help you to help other people understand their emotions? Like, what if it's a good thing? So always ask yourself why, and like give yourself a check. Like, are you afraid of this thing because it's literally a tiger in the room that's going to eat your face? Or are you afraid of these things because you just don't understand it? Understanding can easily be gained. Tigers in the face, not so great. Very different perspective. So if you're feeling this like lost in this, like, hey, this thing is scary feeling, like, definitely reach out. There's so much help now, which is so cool. It's not like The Exorcist, like way back in the day, where like you would have to go to a priest and the priest would tell you you're a horrible person for having this happen. Like, that is not what is occurring at all. Like, everyone's like, oh, like, let's accept you, let's understand what's going on. And what if this is like the best blessing you could ever have? Like, what if this is part of your purpose as a human being? And if you're feeling that call to experience the purpose, like, what if this ties into it? And maybe explore that instead of approaching it with that fear. Yeah, also remember, like, you're never alone. Everyone has spirit guides, and that's another really cool thing that has come with this insight of like being super metaphysical and having these gifts. Like, no person on this earth is alone.
Yeah.
Like, every person has a guide in some capacity. So you can always fall back on people and like, fall back on these guys and be like, what is going on? And like, look for their signs and pay attention, and they will come.
Yeah, I do think it's very obvious that there's we have our own souls and there is other spirits and guides there, because it's often when you go to a funeral or an open casket, there is something that's not there that was there in that person. It's the life. They even found this with science. That something leaves the body a certain, and they can't quite explain it. And they
weighed a soul.
Yeah, weighed a soul. And even when doctors are even like seeing things in patients where they've come back. They can bring people back a lot more lately, and it's like 1 in 20 people who come. I know it's way higher. It's like 1 in 5 people who experience near death have an experience, and it's similar to, and they're able to. It's uncanny, But and the last question I have for you as well is, what's the message for someone who might be in an abusive relationship and is stuck there at the moment as well? And what would your advice be to them who found this talk?
One big thing that happens when you're in an abusive relationship is part of the reason you can't face that it's abuse is because facing that it's abuse is facing the realization that you have 100% failed yourself by getting yourself in that place.
Okay.
And it's hard to look at, because acknowledging that you're in an abusive relationship is acknowledging that you are to blame for getting yourself there, right? Like, it's the way your brain works at the time. And so the most important thing I can always share is none of it is your fault at all. Like, whatever is going on, your partner is telling you it's your fault, it's not your fault. Like no one has an excuse or reason to hurt you on purpose, no matter what you do in this life. And if that's occurring, it's not because they love you.
Mm-hmm.
You don't hurt the things you love. It just isn't like, yes, emotionally, maybe sometimes there's misunderstandings and you guys break up or something like that. Like that's very different. You're not causing the person you love distress on purpose. That is not real. That is not what love is. And if you have someone in your life that is causing you distress on purpose for their own gain, where you're spending all of your time doubting yourself, thinking you're to blame, all of these different things, you are not in a relationship. You are a prisoner.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's true. You very well said. And I think, you're obliged to surround yourself with people who want the best for you. And that's another thing I picked up off Jordan P as well. But, I think you're right. And, I'm very glad that you came on and talked about that, because I think it is a really important topic to talk about. And it's a really big part. And the spiritual health is one thing that's overlooked the whole time, Because I know when I added that idea to the podcast, people were kind of like, oh, why are you doing that? But I think it's huge, and I think you really hit the nail on the head. Like your experiences perfectly complement like how people can get out of it, and being very interested to keep following you and see how how you go on going forward and see what else you'll do in the future. I'm really glad you came on. Thanks very much.
Oh, thank you very much. It's been really great to chat with you. And again, if anyone wants to get any of my stuff, I know you'll link my website, but you can get my book for free or ask me an intuitive question. I'd love to help out on my website, which is damselnomore.com. And I'm just so thankful to get this opportunity to get to chat with you, because this is super great. And again, having these conversations from all the way halfway across the world is like, it's like what you imagine 2020 would be, and you're like, wow, I can't believe the future is here. So it's so cool.
Yeah. Very interesting. I was watching a guy, sorry, just on another side now, the flat earthers there earlier on, and they're explaining why the earth was flat. And I was trying to think to myself, how would they explain our time difference, right now? Like,
right?
It's like, anyway, that's a whole other kettle of fish.
I know. I so badly want to have a flat earther on my podcast. My podcast is called Perceptionist Anonymous, and we tackle like a new metaphysical concept every week to like help it not be weird and strange and just this enigma, and like actually have like real words from real people to like understand it. And I would love to have a flat earther as a guest and just be like, how do you, like, I need to know, like, there has to be a magical or metaphysical side to this in some way, like, please explain.
There's something else going on, I know, and I was thinking the same myself. I'd love to get one on and just like sit down with them for an hour and say, what's going on, where are you coming from with this? I can get where a lot of people are coming from, but
this one's tough.
Yeah, because every time I go on a plane, it says otherwise, But listen, no, I really appreciate it, and I will link all your stuff, and that's all I can say. Thanks very much, and I really enjoyed your chat, and I hope to have this up in the next day or two.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, you have my social media stuff, so you can just tag me, and Absolutely. I'll know. I'll share all the stuff, and it'll be great.
Yeah, fair play. Thanks very much, Emily. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. It was great chatting with you. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. Great evening. Evening.
All the best.
Okay. Bye.